Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights.
Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed. This is another weekly recap. I am your host, Hector Kolonas, and I am joined today by a co-host who doesn't need an introduction, but in case you're new to coworking, I am joined by the amazing Kat Johnson. Kat, how are you today?
Hey, Hector. I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here again. You are no stranger to the podcast, but you are not here often enough. So we've got to fix that. This is the week 3 of 2026 recap. If you want to follow along wherever you're listening to this or watching this, head over to thisweekincoworking.com and click on week 3 2026 to get more information about the things that Kat and I are about to dig into. This week's episode, podcast, game, all of the above are sponsored by the amazing Kat Johnson, who did something pretty important this week. You called out that it's time to reclaim the word co-working. Kat, why?
Well, the broad strokes of this, when co-working first emerged, office rental had already been around for decades. Desk rental was nothing new. It was something where people were freed up with laptops, could work anywhere, and realized that it was way better to work among people, to have the connection, to have the community. And then as co-working has grown and evolved, it's grown into flex space and lots of different things that we call it. But I fear that along the way, we've lost the meaning that the word co-working is now being used to describe flex space and office rental and on-demand workspace. And I just want to realign the industry. My big vision is like, let's realign the industry around what co-working truly is, because I think it's a real disservice to people who are looking for co-working, looking for connection and community, and find themselves in a space that doesn't prioritize that at all. And I really like flex space. I think it's the evolution of work. I just think it's really important that we reclaim the word co-working, especially as people are desperate for connection and belonging and want to have more to their days and work than just sitting alone.
Well said, Kat. And it's an interesting one because obviously I sit in the editor position of a publication called This Week in Coworking, where we don't only talk about the community focused side of the business. So I completely get that there is this terminology or taxonomy problem that we have in the industry with what is co-working. I mean, I don't like the whole what is real co-working and not real co-working, but what is co-working? Is it the overarching category under which flex office sits, or is it a type of flex office? So which one sits above the other one, right? They're all part of commercial real estate. They're all part of neighborhood fabric, which is mentioned in the newsletter. They're all part of how the future of the world works. But in your mind, is co-working a part of flex, or is flex a kind of co-working?
I would argue that they're two different things. In terms of hierarchy, I think where we run into problems is when everything's called co-working, but I also don't think that co-working is part of flex. I don't know. That's an interesting question. I'll have to think about that. That flex supersedes co-working, maybe because from people looking for a space, then they get to choose what they want. But I think the most important thing is clearly defining and clarifying and surfacing. Part of what I want to do is surface all of the community-focused spaces who are really doing this and just quietly transforming lives and towns. I think what we hear the most about is from CRE voices, from flex office providers, and part of what I want to do as we kind of redefine and reclaim co-working is elevate the voices of the people doing incredible work.
Yeah. I mean, when you were speaking, I was like, well, you're not actually saying that you want to kick flex out of co-working. You're not saying this is not co-working. What I'm hearing is that the indie voices, the community focused spaces, the nonprofits, the 5 desks at the back of my office kind of person who's supporting not local therapists, they're not owning enough of the narrative. They're not having enough of being a big enough part of the story that they kind of fall under what everyone else is doing. And on that, I completely agree because it's hard to go up against the marketing budget, the PR budget, the charisma of some of the larger, more vocal brands in our industry. It's why we have, co-working people and the newsletter. It's why we now have brands that, there isn't just 3 brands in co-working. So I completely agree with you. But in order to amplify that message, you don't just need a plan, you don't just need an idea. You need a peer network. You need a group of people who are in this with you. Tell us more about the Co-working Creators Lab and who that is built for.
Yeah, I'd love to. And Hector, if I can backstep 1 second,
Sure.
something that keeps me awake at night as I shout co-working from the rooftops, I talk about it to anybody who will let me. I've been doing this for 12, 13 years. My concern is that someone who hears from me goes and joins a quote co-working space and then sits by themselves all day, every day. So to answer your question, yeah, the Coworking Creators Lab, I am so stoked about it. It's an evolution of what we've been doing since 2020. And when COVID came about, space operators were freaking out like, a member just tested positive, what do I do? Or our town is shutting us down. Or there was a lot of panic, stress. Everyone was wondering what to do. And we were having these kind of peer calls. I would just open a Zoom and we would do like peer support with each other. I had been toying with the idea of creating a membership for a while, and a conversation you and I had when you said, during a crisis, most people sit around talking about how bad it is, and the smart people get to work building. I took that as a nudge to create what became the lab. And you were a part of it from the beginning. As you know, it was a small, really close-knit group of space operators, and we did marketing training, we did strategy, we did community building and things like that. And it was very much a peer support network. So fast forward almost 6 years now,
Wow.
which is wild. The evolution of the lab last year when we ran the Co-working Creators Summit, it really kind of realigned me in my work, in my purpose, in who I serve. Like it just became very, very clear. These are my people, the community focused spaces. I want to give everything I've got to them. And so we have repositioned and reworked the lab to be the Co-working Creators Lab and just leveled up. We have workshops and events every week. We have a really active community in Slack. We introduced a new content studio each week where we look at what's working and not working and different examples. So I just am taking everything I'm passionate about and pouring it into the Co-working Creators Lab with the intention of elevating community-focused spaces because I want them to succeed. I want to hear more from them. I want them to be confident in their messaging and communications. I want them to learn best practices, which is really hard when they're all sitting isolated. Like one of the great ironies of community building is that you do it by yourself a lot of the time. So all that's the Co-working Creators Lab, and it feels like the beginning of a marathon. Like I have a big vision and a big intention, but it feels really aligned with who I am and the work that I want to do.
And it's been amazing to watch you grow over the last 6 years and just still maintain that peer support level, but now sprinkled in with, best practices, teachers, lessons, tips and tricks, the cry it out room, all these things that you will learn when you get into the Creative Lab. But you did mention a very specific term, and it's quite different from anyone who may have seen the lab before. For a long time, the lab was for the indie operator. You're now shifting towards supporting the co-working creators as opposed to like community focused spaces. Is that is that you kind of saying that who who the lab is for is opening up a bit more, or is it just that it's an evolution of the terminology?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things going on there. Just from a positioning point of view, I think the term indie, it didn't necessarily resonate with people. Some of them think of themselves as boutique or community or this or that. But I think of it as create content, create community, create impact. Those are kind of the pillars, the things that if people resonate with that, it's going to be a good fit. But going back to my early days, when I went from writing about co-working for publications to wanting to be part of the movement, the place I found in it was to teach people about content marketing, content strategy, all of this. And this is at a time when people were like, what's that? When I talked about content marketing. And now fast forward, and content is just a given. It's a high priority for small brands, huge brands, and everything in between. And I think we're at a place with creators that's similar, and creators being different than influencers, like creators being people who are actively storytelling and engaging people into what they're doing through content and creating. And I think of it as content, but also events and everything public facing is what you're creating. So it's kind of this broad thing, but I really feel like it captures the spirit of co-working, like create content, create community, create impact. So I've kind of expanded the definition of creators here.
I like that. And I think it's very important. There was a link in last week's newsletter, I believe, about how firms are hiring storytellers. And the reason for that is every firm is now attracting talent, partners, clients through storytelling by becoming creators. It used to be
Yes.
that every company was a media company. Now every company has to have personal brands or key people of influence through which they tell their story. So I love this shift towards creators, and I cannot wait to see more of our listeners, more of our readers join us in the lab for that.
Thanks, Hector. And a quick note with AI, this has always been true, but now so more than ever. A blog post in and of itself has zero value, right? So yesterday in the lab, we were talking about micro moments and pulling
Mhm.
those out and building stories around them. And that's what resonates now. Like you have to be able to tell something that only you can tell, that only your community can tell, that only your space can tell. That's going to be what's compelling moving forward, because it's no longer interesting to have an ebook or a blog post or whatever that was churned out by AI.
Yep. That's very, very interesting. I'm smiling because on Monday, on the This Week in Co-working podcast feed, we're going to drop an episode with New York's Gen Z whisperer, who understands how the Gen Z workforce is approaching work, where they work, how they work. And we dug into what goes into picking co-working spaces. And it is these topics. The next generation of workers are not looking for that shiny desk and the windows, and they're looking for vibes. And we'll dig more into that with Danielle in Monday's podcast. But I did want to bring it back to this week's news,
Yep.
because there's a lot in this week's newsletter. I think there was 30 something links. Once again, go and check that on the newsletter or in your inbox to get those links. And there's two ways that we can go from here. The one is talking about why now? Is co-working having an identity crisis? And the other is kind of coming back towards marketing trends. As you're my guest co-host, Kat, do you want to dig a little bit more into the marketing side of co-working, or should we dig into the potential identity crisis of our industry?
I think let's keep going on the identity crisis, because
Alrighty.
there was a link here that really, it was fascinating.
All right. Tell us what that link was.
Okay, the one with founder cafes as third spaces. And basically, the article focuses on San Francisco, I think, but these spaces are popping up for founders who don't want to be in coffee shops and don't want to be in co-working spaces. So on the Forbes article, can I just recap it here?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So the description of it is founder-only spaces are emerging as micro ecosystems engineered for building, thinking, and serendipitous collisions. And I'm like, well, that sounds a lot like co-working at its finest, right? So down a little bit further, this is the thing that this should strike fear into the heart of everyone who is running a workspace that is not focused on connection. So this guy says, Coworking rents you a chair and sells you a membership with a 1% chance you might encounter someone remotely relevant to your career path in the same stuffy building. And this is a perfect description of what I'm talking about with reclaiming coworking. Like a 1% chance that you might encounter someone. It's like, no, that should be flipped. There should be like a 99% chance that on any day you're going to have a cool conversation, you're going to meet someone interesting, you're going to share what you're working on, be able to offer some advice or perspective. Like that's co-working, right? And the fact that people are now moving out of what's being called co-working, which is basically just like flex office and desk rental, they're moving out of it to create something that looks a lot like co-working. It's
Yep.
like, this is wild to watch this, having been part of this journey of scrappy movement, global industry, and now we're at this reckoning of like, it's just not enough. Like fancy buildings are just not enough.
Yep. I think we're also in another one of those cycles. I mean, we discussed about when I kind of came into co-working early 2011, 2012, and I kind of bought into this idea that I'm going to move into this building surrounded by other startups, and I was alone in an entire floor for 6 months. There wasn't even a community manager.
I tell that
And
story a lot. Hector was
I
alone on a
do.
floor.
And I'm like, this is just a scam. Like this word makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
But then when the metaphorical excrement hit the fan, and I had to create a new type of co-working space. That is what some people will call traditional co-working. I really saw how these spaces change neighborhoods, livelihoods, people, communities. And I was like, I get it now. And so I say that all to say, is this a new thing? Or has this always just been the same problem, just in a cycle? Like, because I heard the word co-working when I moved into that empty building, and they used that term. Is it a cycle, or is this a new problem that operators have to think about?
You know, I think sometimes people have the intention of having an activated, engaged community, but they're not sure how to do that. They open the doors, people kind of go to their offices and shut the doors, and then they reach out to me in a panic. What do we do? How do we build community? And the reason why a lot of spaces, a lot of brands don't do it is because it's really hard. And it
Mhm.
takes all day, every day engagement. It takes a high emotional intelligence. It's really hard. So a lot of people dismiss it, and we're just going to have the space. Sure,
Yeah.
if that answers your question in terms of cycles. But I think the thing that's really clear is, especially with this Forbes article, like people may or may not listen to me. Maybe some of those people will listen to a Forbes article that it's like they're peeling off to do something more meaningful because
Mhm.
there's only a 1% chance that they're going to have any interesting engagement. I feel like
Yeah,
this is important.
it is really important. And it's interesting because a lot of people, as you say, come in with a good intent. They're like, we want to create this community, we want to activate it, we want to hire great, bubbly people. But then those bubbly people get stuck doing admin tasks and changing bins, and it's this really interesting thing because it seems like a very profitable business, but if you do it incorrectly, it becomes very, very expensive to run a co-work. It's not only hard, but it's also expensive. And then you start cutting people, and then that community dissipates because the person who's charged with being that glue can no longer do what they're supposed to do. And that's where kind of thing all falls apart. As I said, there was no community manager in that building. I was just left there, and they send me an email every now and again. So it could be just that. It could be that we're hitting that maturity point, and people are starting to realize that there's different routes and different markets. And I think it also creates an opportunity for people who've found that lightning in a bottle of creating community. There are so many spaces who can't do it with huge budgets. It's a new form of management agreement where operators go in, activate that space, rebrand that space, take full control of ops. So that's an interesting thing to think about. I do want to note that in the newsletter this week, in the discussion section, there was another completely separate thread of two VCs talking about how co-working spaces are not good because they do not create enough moments of collision. And I'm like, once again, name the spaces, right? Not every space is created the same. And this goes back to something I've been thinking about for a long time is, do we need subcategories of co-working? This is a community focused space, for example. This is
Yes.
corporate co-working. That way, at least it's fair on the folks who they don't have Spotify as a customer. They have 100 important freelancers who are there every day because they're there for the community, they collaborate. And that's two separate types of businesses.
Hmm.
There are very few that do both, but lumping them all once again under just this word co-working just does a disservice to both of them.
You know, it's something we talked about yesterday with the career leapfrogging that people do now. They might change jobs 3 times, but still have their home co-working space. The industry at large spends a lot of time talking about how to attract corporates, and I totally understand, like one big paycheck from one company once a month, fantastic. But I think there's a whole other layer to that of like, where do the people actually want to be? It's one thing to pop in because you're in town for the day or for the
Mhm.
week. It's a whole other thing where that's going to be your home away from home. And this is where community focused spaces have a massive, massive advantage because the bigger brands get, the less energy they can give to each individual community manager, community member. So everything gets like systematized higher and higher
Mhm.
until you end up, this is worst case scenario, top down brand who's doing all the marketing, all the comms, community managers where there's a high turnover. They don't really care. They're certainly not engaged in the neighborhood, the local chamber, the downtown association, all these things. They're just playing receptionist. And the members have a bad experience, right? Because no one is engaged. And members look to the community managers for how they should be to set the vibe in the space. And if it's a revolving door of people who just sit at the front desk on their phones, like that's what the members are going to do. And it's just a massive missed opportunity. This is where it goes from kind of the roots of co-working pointing to the future of co-working. It's like, this is not a nice to have. This is like, if you're not doing that, the layer of engagement, connection, community, even call it networking if you want, but if your members don't know each other, there is a huge potential that's being left on the table.
There is. And there's, just because there's so many of these articles in different places, different conversations happening, there's a need for this community side of it. And if it's not being met, someone's going to rise up and try and create that. And if you have a space, you can rise up and take that opportunity as well.
That is the
Um,
golden nugget, what you just said. This is what people want. So you're going to do it or else they're going to go somewhere else.
exactly. And so it's up to you whether you want to be part of that. But let's flip it on to kind of more practical. Now, obviously, a good way to get ahead of this and stay ahead of this is to join the lab. But we've also seen a link from Taylor at Tailmaker digging into 7 marketing trends that he feels 2026 is all going to be about. Given you're wearing your marketing hat, which is a lovely hat, and
Thank you.
you are a marketeer, I'm going to run through those and you give me kind of a quick feedback as to whether you think he's on the money or not.
Yeah, and
Um,
I love
First,
Taylor. He's been such an awesome addition to the co-working world.
he absolutely has. First off, he says AI won't be king when it comes to content marketing, basically saying it's all about systems. It's not about just giving it prompt and getting it out. What do you say? Agree or disagree?
I think of AI as an assistant, so it's never copy and paste, right? It's the assistant. And I think what we said before with the storytelling angle, it's like you can use AI to help you shape it, help you think. But I agree that AI is not king for content. Video stuff is not my world at all. They're doing a whole other thing, which is mind blowing.
I mean, that's interesting. I think there's actually another piece in the newsletter this week about Anthropic releasing a product called Cowork, which
Yes.
is going to pee off a lot of people who are targeting engineers with the
Yeah.
term co-working in their ads. I'm going to park that because I haven't processed it enough, to be honest.
Yeah,
Mike Lewis
same.
did a really good piece into like goods and bads. I think we're still going to see the impact on SEO and AI SEO around that. It's going to drive
Yeah.
everybody nuts for a little bit, but just interesting to see.
Yep.
I completely agree that AI is the assistance, and then the human kind of does the first and last part that makes it human. On that topic, have you seen this trend of people creating AI avatars so they can generate videos on demand as opposed to having to record them? Are you a
Uh,
fan? Given the fact that you create videos quite a lot.
I mean, I'm a fan of humanness, so this stuff freaks me out a little bit to like take a blog post and then have something that looks like me read it to you. I think we're in a really interesting time where discerning what is what, and it's like if I don't care enough to, I think Lauren said this, Lauren Walker. It's like, if I don't care enough to create the content, why should you care enough to consume it? So, and even the guy who, Adam Mosseri from Instagram, he talked about how the trend is like more real, more authentic, more just like in the moment, real stuff that,
Mhm.
so we'll see. I don't have a good answer
Yeah.
for that.
I mean, as someone who creates video content as well, I'm like, it'll make my life easier, but it's a very slippery slope, right? Once you're on that, what's the point? If you're not going to put the effort in, how can I expect someone to watch a 30-minute video or a 29-minute podcast if we're not going to speak it out like humans and
I'll
actually
send you
discuss it?
my notes. You send me your
Yeah.
notes.
And we'll have the system do it, and then they'll have an AI agent that
Yeah.
summarizes that and then puts it into an email. It creates more noise. It creates so
Yeah.
much.
Agreed.
And yes. So next point he says is going beyond the blog and email to drive results. We've just discussed that. Absolutely, you have to go beyond the written form. You have to create that personal brand. If it's not in our industry, in your local community,
Yep.
with your partners, celebrate their wins. I completely agree there.
Yep.
AI adoption is going to be polarizing. Like we just said, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of co-working spaces emphasize that their support channel is run by humans, their salespeople are human, their community managers are
They're
human.
going to get the phone. I
They're going to get a human
know.
on the phone.
Yep.
So this is going to be a pretty interesting differentiator, especially kind of the premium side where you don't want to speak to AI agents. You don't want to have to deal with dynamic pricing on the meeting room. You want to just know that things just work. So it's going to be a really interesting shift, I think, as well.
This goes to what you were saying earlier. Like, Flex is great, right? To be able to go to Boston and get your space. And co working is also great. They're different products completely.
Yes. In my opinion, it becomes the ecosystem of work. And under that, we have co-working community spaces, we have Flex, you have on
Yeah.
demand, you have lounges, you have all of that.
Yeah, that's
Um,
it, Hector. I could totally get behind that. The ecosystem of work. And then within that, there are different models and options.
Yeah, I think that's it. And then we're still going to have arguments from now and 30 years from now. What is co-working? What isn't co-working? But if we're still here doing this in 30 years, either something's gone really, really right or
Yeah,
something really, really wrong. But I'm not sure which one.
we'll see. Time will tell, my friend.
Well, we will definitely find out. Kat, there was much more I wanted to dig into with you, but I am cognizant of your time and of our listeners' time and our reviewers' time. So I'm going to kind of put a pause here. I want to say thank you for supporting the newsletter. Thank you for creating the lab. Thank you for everything that you do and for joining me today to riff on this week's newsletter. Anything you want to share before we hop out for this week?
Just thank you, Hector. It's been so cool to watch you grow this week in co-working from an idea to a whole media ecosystem. I'm so proud of you and the crew, and it's just really cool. It's a really valuable part of the co-working world.
My pleasure. And thanks again for joining us. We will be back in your podcast feed on Monday with my interview with Danielle Farage. So look out for that as well.